Okay, so I just got done watching The Barrens, which this film is available to watch right now on Tubi, and is directed by Darren Lynn Bousman, who directed my three favourite entries in the Saw franchise. He did Saw 2, Saw 3, and Saw 4. And so I was excited to see him tackle another horror project outside of the Saw franchise, and this film is marketed as a monster film. And I think that is a bit of a mislead in the marketing because this film can be one of two things. This film can be classified as a monster movie, but then on the other hand, this film can be called a survival movie. And I think the movie's more structured, and I think it works better at being a survival horror film. Really, like, the monster is really only the cherry on top, and the survival elements is the ice cream. The monster is really a side forward in this because this movie is much more character focused and story driven, which that's my first positive with this movie is the characters. I think the first act of this movie does a really good job at setting up its characters and and presenting believable human beings to us. And because right from frame one of this movie, like, you can already tell, like, something's up with this family. Like, their relationship, their chemistry, like, they aren't communicating the way that they should be as a family. And so yeah, you can tell something's not quite right because everybody's just very down on their luck. Everybody's like sad. Um, and that comes in later on in the film and becomes a bigger subplot of the film, um, which I really liked the way the characters were presented to us in the first act, since these are the characters that we're going to be following throughout the runtime of this movie. And I think a lot of why these characters are good is from the performances. I think the performances that are given from these characters are really fucking good. Like, especially in the first act when they're establishing, kind of what the problem is. Like, you don't know quite yet, like, what's happening. Like, you know something is wrong with the family, but you don't know what. And all of that is told through the performances of this movie, and especially like the way the movie proceeds, and what happens in the second and third act. Like, the performances just get better and better, like, as this movie goes along. Especially the performer who plays the character of Richard in this film, which he's our main character. He's the one that we're kind of following, throughout this movie, because this is his story. Because the film about this is the film about a guy who's revisiting his past, and he's going back to this place that he feels happy, but he also feels threatened by, because of this urban legend. Like, about he heard this urban legend when he was a young kid, like, about the Jersey monster. And so he's going back to this camp, like, with his family, because, like, he wants to have some one-on-one bonding time, like, no technology, no distractions, just good quality family time. And, like, that's what he wants. And, like, it doesn't go the way he expects. And so that's what I really liked about this film, is when this film starts, Richard is just he's a good family man. Like, he has a family, and he's trying to do his best, to serve his family, and and to bring them together closer. Because this film is based in present day with technology. Like, he has a teenage girl that, like, that's always on her phone and texting her friends. And then he has a wife that he has a wife that is kind of the same. And he's seeing this, and you just see that, like, this is not what he wants. He does not want to live in a house where he's unhappy, and his kids are unhappy, and his wife is unhappy. So he wants to change it. He wants to bring them closer together, and so that's kind of where, like, that's kind of the starting point for his character. And then as the film goes, like, as this family, walks deeper and deeper into the forest, you see a different side of him. The film, his past, in a way, his past catches up to him, I guess, and he's revisiting, all these memories that he had with his dad, but then also like the bad memories as well, of the Jersey monster and all that. And just speaking on the monster, portion of this movie, I think the monster in this movie, this is a very unique monster movie. It's a very different film, and and you know what, I applaud, Darren Lynn Bousman for being able to actually being able to change the monster genre and actually do something different with it. But then at the end of the day, it's all about how it's executed, and the way it's executed in here, I think works well enough, because like, this monster is only an urban legend, so it could be real, it could be real, it might not be real. Like, there's that mystery element to this movie as well too, because Richard is seeing this monster, but then the family isn't seeing what he's seeing. So like, is he just hallucinating, or is he actually seeing it? Like, that's something of this movie that I really dug. Like, that's really what kept me watching, was the mystery of this movie. But this movie isn't great, so yeah, let's get into some of the negatives for this movie. The first negative is this movie comes to a halt. This movie comes to a complete stop at about the midpoint of the second act, even like a little bit before. And like, once this family goes deeper and deeper into the woods, the movie comes to a complete halt for me. In the movie, it slows down so much, because like, the first act, like, I was hooked on the characters, I was liking the story direction, but then the second act, it slows down when it should just be, when it should just be getting higher and higher. And a lot of that is because where the psychological aspects of this film, come into play, and where Richard's character, starts to go insane, and he starts seeing things, that aren't really there. Which that should be, where a lot of the intensity is in this movie, but no. Because the reason why I say no here is because as we see Richard go insane, we're not learning any new information with that. It's an hour-long montage of just Richard going insane. Like, you're not learning any new information from what you already know. And so you're really just seeing him go insane, and the family walks around the woods for the rest of the movie. Like, really, that's probably the best way I can break down the second and the third actors to this movie. There's no new story details that are making this plot more interesting. Which, like, I feel there's a lot more potential in the second and third act, and I'm not sure like what was cut from the second act, because I know Darren Lynn Bousman's original runtime for this movie was 130 minutes, so I'm not sure what was cut, but it just it felt more like a montage of him going insane, and just montages of his family just walking through the woods, like, really doing nothing for the rest of the movie. Like, they're really just running around, screaming. Like, that's it. And so that's where the movie was really boring for me, because after about 10 minutes of it, like, I was sick of it. Like, I was sick of seeing the exact same sequence on repeat for an hour. But that's not to say that the second act have some enjoyable moments in it. I think there is some really intense moments, especially in the second and third act. That like that I really liked, that that kept me interested. Um, the other thing that I was mixed on about this movie was the editing. This film is directed by Darren Bousman, as I've already said. And Darren Bousman has a very particular way of how he edits his films, and so there is that signature like editing that he does here with with the sped up cut in certain shots, and that's only here for a couple of frames, and that I think works really well, like both in the monster scenes and as we see Richard, go insane. I think the sped up editing works really well for that. But then on the other hand, the editing, like there's scenes where, where his son will be talking to him and then it just cuts off and then we're onto a totally different sequence. And it's like there was at least a good 10 minutes cut from that scene, and really that's a lot of this movie. The editing feels very choppy, especially in the second act actually, where someone's talking, it cuts off, goes to a new scene, and what was said before isn't happening anymore. So like an example. So here there was a scene when his son was talking to his dad about like his feet are sore, can you carry me the rest of the way? And then in the very next frame, he's on the ground walking. So you have to assume that at least 10 minutes has gone by already, and they've been walking for 10 minutes. And it's like it was so odd to me, because like this film would cut off like in the middle of a sentence, and it's just like I don't see why. I didn't see any purpose for the film doing that. But yeah, to me the editing of this film it felt very out of place in a lot of scenes, but then when it worked well. What else is there? Oh yeah, the payoff of this movie. As I've said, it all comes down to execution, which the execution here, it doesn't work. Like, on one hand, I want to say, yes, it works, but then the more I think about it, it really does not work in this movie. Because this film, it ends on a very weird note where, where something happens, and we see it for like a minute, but then it ends with no exposition on why or how. And so that's where it was disappointing to me,